Well, how about that? So I don't see anyone in here yet. Hopefully, a few people will drop in and leave some comments. But Sinner wins this match in 4 sets. There's clearly a turning point that happened in this match that I came on after the second match and thought this match was still in Carlos's control. But that 5-4 game in the second set, where Sinner held serve in that second set, and I see a couple people joining, which is great. Where Sinner held serve at 5-4 in the second set was a huge turning point in this match because Sinner, you could tell, looked really nervous at the beginning of this match, hasn't been able to hold serve and close out sets, never mind matches. And that match clearly changed going into the third set. Hey, Pam, I saw your note. I saw your comment, of course, and I tried to get on after the third set, but of course I was having some technical difficulties. So looking good now. But anyway, going into that third set, everything changed, mostly with how Yannick was serving. He was serving incredibly well, where he started to serve well, right? A lot of service winners and finally some aces, and he was able to hold serve easier. And for some reason, Carlos seemed to get down on himself, which was a little surprising because I thought he was playing an incredible match through the first 2 sets. So it was really hard to tell, did Yannick step up his game, which of course he did, but it also looked like Alcaraz's game came down a little bit. Excuse me. Yeah, it was perfect. Well, I don't know. I don't think Alcaraz fans will think it was perfect, but the Sinner fans, I think it was good for tennis. This rivalry is incredibly important to tennis right now, and you don't want to see someone completely run away with it. But one of the other things I thought coming in is why I predicted Yannick would probably win was the court surface. And you could see it. And it's just very slight here and there. When Sinner likes to hit his backhand, sometimes he hits that one-legged backhand where he jumps up and hits the one-legged backhand, where he couldn't do that well at the French Open. He couldn't quite hit it perfectly, and he can't generate enough pace on it. At Wimbledon, on the other hand, you could see the few chances he had to do it, the ball would really skid through the court to Carlos's backhand, and Carlos was just under so much pressure and couldn't hit a good passing shot. So that one shot, now how many times did he do it throughout the whole match? Probably like 5 to 8 times. But it was much more effective here at Wimbledon than it was Wimbledon. I know everybody likes to give me a hard time. Grew up on the East Coast of the United States, and for some reason I think most of us pronounce it Wimbledon, not Wimbledon with the D. Anyway, so Henry Hoy, well, clearly you must be an Alcaraz fan. So today you hate tennis. I don't let what a 20-year-old does or a 22-year-old does change my mood that much throughout a day. So I enjoy watching tennis. If Carlos would have won, it would have impacted my mood for the rest of the day. I just don't believe in that sort of letting a sports event that has nothing to do with you impact how you might feel through the rest of the day. So Forza, live your life. Carlos lost today, but he had a 5-match winning streak against that guy right there, and he just didn't pull it out today. All right, we got a comment from Ixor. I'm a huge fan of American football, and I live in India. I think the need to jog. What's the current change? Oh, okay, that's a total nonsensical comment. Sorry. So Hasib Khan, I'm in the States. And of course, so we're about 8 hours behind the time. I think 7 hours behind Wimbledon time. That's right, Keith. I agree. Balancing the head-to-head is great for the sport. This is such a good rivalry that it was nice to see. I think it was good for the sport for Yannick to pull out this match win. And I think, it's weird. They know it too, these two guys. when Carlos loses, you can see how gracious he is. And he's not even that upset about it, which these guys are freaks when it comes to that. It's very unusual that these guys have so much respect for one another. And there's Yannick holding the trophy. Very cool. But I think they realize the importance, how balancing this head to head is for the sport overall. So the tide shifts now to the hard courts. Let's see. Let's see if we have any fresh comments coming in. These guys are such class acts, you know. When they talk about role models for sports and how it affects young people, you know, sometimes you think that doesn't really have that much of an impact. Well, just think about Nick Kyrgios, how much of an impact he had on so many junior tennis players in a negative manner. His antics on the court, his general personality and behavior. Nick Kyrgios represents like the worst in sportsmanship and just general decency. And that impacted a whole generation of young tennis players in a negative form. And that was after having such great role models of Nadal, Federer, and Novak. And now to see these two guys jump in and, you know, sort of even elevate the sportsmanship that Federer, Novak, and Nadal had is nice to see, because these guys should be impacting, you know, if you're 8, 10, 12 years old, 14 years old, these guys, or he's probably your idol right here. And his behavior has a dramatic impact on how you'll develop as a junior tennis player and how you might handle yourself, or at least it should. Versus the direction where we excuse me, where we were going for a while with, you know, the influence that Kyrgios had on young men tennis players or young boy tennis players for a while, even in their strokes mechanics, which, you know, Kyrgios is not someone you want to emulate on your stroke mechanics whatsoever. And you can just see it in junior tennis today. There are so many young boys, particularly with less than ideal stroke mechanics, because they're trying to copy what Nick Kyrgios was doing. These two, on the other hand, have, I wouldn't say traditional stroke mechanics by any means, but very more replicatable stroke mechanics, especially Carlos. Um, Yannick's forehand definitely has a lot more complexity, or a little bit more complexity with the way he hits his forehand, but it's not a detriment. You don't end up hitting the ball later when you pronate your wrist the way Yannick does. He still has the elbow low and the wrist out. So if you have people emulating Yannick's forehand, I would much rather see that than emulating what Kyrgios did and how much influence that Kyrgios had. That's a great one. Right flag. Women's final was a better match. Yes, indeed. That is comical, right? Interesting. I did predict, if you watch the prediction videos, I predicted Yannick would win this match, but barely. I just thought the court conditions favored Yannick a little bit more than they did Alcaraz. But I could have been wrong with that. I think Alcaraz had a great chance to win this match for whatever reason. Sinner stepped up his game in the third set, and Carlos didn't match that for the rest of the third and fourth set. But I picked also that Anisimova would beat Iga, and how wrong was I on that match? But it's not because that Anisimova can't beat Iga. If the same Anisimova showed up against Sabalenka, that showed up against Sabalenka, showed up to play Iga, Anisimova could have certainly beat Iga. But that Anisimova didn't show up whatsoever. She just totally, the moment was much too big for her. and she seemed to be satisfied with her win against Sabalenka and just couldn't handle her nerves. So that happens in tennis, and it's not predictable. I'm not at Wimbledon, and I couldn't predict how Anisimovan's nerves, how she was going to handle the nerves being in her first final. Some people say, well, you can easily predict that. No, you never know until someone makes it into their first final. You just never know whatsoever. Dreamy, what smile? You're talking about that guy right there, Sinner, or Alcaraz, who was also smiling? I mean, the loser was smiling. How? Look at this. The loser smiling. How cool is that? I mean, Sabalenka, if you watch this live stream, this is what you need to learn. Well, sometimes she does smile and laughs. Depends on how she lost and to what opponent. But, you know. And Gerald, Aruna, heartbroken. Understand you're an Alcaraz fan, of course. But he had a great run, 5 matches in a row against Sinner. And I suspect he's going to put up a fight at the U.S. Open for sure. The question becomes at the U.S. Open, like who can really contend with these two guys if they're playing their best tennis? Clearly, Novak can't, and everyone else behind Novak can't. I think it's going to have to be one of the younger players to really step up. I mean, Fonseca is not ready yet. Arthur Fils, he is injured. He was playing great tennis. Jack Draper was playing tremendous tennis earlier this year, but he's certainly fallen off in the last couple of months. I'm gonna listen to this for a moment. If you're watching this and you thought that Alcaraz had the mental edge over Yannick because of winning 5 times in a row, I don't think you quite understand these two guys and how they approach the game. Bad losses, I don't think affects these guys that much. These are not Alexander Zverev. They're still young. The moment gets too big for a lot of players, but not these two guys. These two guys are just like the big three. Someone has to lose. That doesn't mean someone choked. For those of you who might think that Yannick choked at the French Open, that wasn't a choke. You don't know the definition of a choke if you think that's choking. Alcaraz played fantastic tennis. Yes, Sinner had a chance during the 3 break points to win the match at the French Open, but none of those were really nervous shots and maybe a little bit tight. But that's, in my book, that's not considered choking. That's considered 2 tremendous tennis players that have incredible mental fortitude that one person just ends up losing. It's really that simple. So if you thought that Yannick was at a disadvantage after losing the French, like every commentator was talking about, that it's going to impact him. These guys are just different. They're just wired different. They understand and they have this larger perspective that these two have something that most other players don't have. And that is just extreme mental fortitude where they're like hockey goalies in a sense where if you get scored upon, you just forget it and you move on. Like they don't think with a rear view lens where a lot of other players think about bad losses and what happened to them in the past. These two guys are just forward thinkers and they're able to do things like the big three did and just keep working to what they want to achieve and play their best tennis when it mattered most, which in this match was the 5-4 game in the second set. That was the turning point. If Yannick would have lost that game and not held serve at 5-4 in the second set, I think he probably loses this match because he's just had a trouble holding serve at the end of sets and at the end of matches against Alcaraz as of late. And when he was able to hold serve by hitting 3 incredible shots, and Alcaraz had him under pressure during all 3 of those rallies, and he came out ahead and won that second set. So it was 1 set apiece at the end of that second set. That was a huge boost to Jannik's hopes and mentality, because he was able to then just relax a little bit more and play his best tennis. Now that's how I think. That's how I saw it anyway. That was the critical game in this match. And some people might say that Carlos didn't play that well. I think you can make an argument to that for sure. His drop shots, he was maybe trying to be too precise at times, and his touch wasn't quite as good as normal. But that's not because of he was off. When the ball's skidding through the grass and you're hitting like Jannik is to Alcaraz, to be able to pull off drop shots at taking 90-mile-an-hour ground strokes and hitting them as precise as Carlos can normally do, but not when you get that little bit of extra skid on the court, that it's really hard to execute those drop shots. And so those of you that think that Carlos's variety was lacking and he wasn't executing as well, you could make an argument for that, but don't make the mistake that those were forced errors, because it's just that a little extra hard to execute those shots. And as incredible as Carlos is to be able to execute those shots with precision, it's just really hard to do. Really, almost no one in the world can do it except for Alcaraz at times. So you might think that he was a little bit off in his drop shots, like some of the announcers were talking about, that he wasn't able to execute them. That was mostly because of Jannik's penetration on the shots and the court conditions, right? The court conditions matter. Like, I talk about court conditions so much between the clay and the grass. Even though the grass was playing slow, the ball's bouncing lower, it is skidding a little bit more. And that, that 1 or 2% difference, which the difference in speed is actually much more than 1 or 2%, how the ball decelerates on clay versus how it decelerates much less on grass once it bounces, is the big factor in why I chose Jannik to win Wimbledon, but I figured he was going to lose the French, which I was almost wrong about that, because I think Jannik probably should have won the French Open as well, or had the opportunities, of course, too. But I thought the court conditions favored Carlos at the French, and I think the court conditions favored Jannik here. And forget about how well they play or not. I think this difference in who wins or who loses really comes down to weather conditions and court conditions, with all else being equal. If both these guys play at their top level, and a lot of people think that Carlos has a higher top level, and people give me grief for that, saying that I don't think so. I mean, these guys are like equal at their top level. It's just that Alcaraz has more variety, and so people think that he has a higher ceiling. So that Jannik does something a little bit more one-dimensional, but that ceiling of that one dimension is incredibly high, where Alcaraz has a ceiling that's similar but different because of how they play the game. They just approach it different. So MT, thanks. You were the only one who assessed about Jannik's advantage, but you became skeptical. I did after the second set. I don't know if it was skeptical. He was just getting out-served. Like, it was really hard to break Carlos. That deuce side slice serve was killing Jannik in the first 2 sets. And then Jannik was, and I still think Jannik can do much better on his serve, because Jannik does a flat first serve on every serve and does a kick serve on every second serve. And Carlos was just on his serve unless Jannik was serving aces or service winners, which he didn't start doing until the third set. So that's why I become very skeptical, because Jannik didn't seem like he was able to get any free points on his serve. The scary part is, if Jannik, and he should, I think he absolutely should hit an aggressive second serve on his first serve, meaning go for the lines with your kick serve on a first serve, not all the time, but maybe 15 to 20% of the time, because guys like Alcaraz almost seems like he could see where Yannick was serving. Now, if Yannick hits the lines, it didn't matter, but he wasn't doing that. That's really hard to do, right? He wasn't doing that until the third and fourth set. So I did become skeptical. Yannick stepped up his game. Carlos didn't match it. And I think that's why we have the results that we got. Anyhow, looks like people are dropping off. Thanks for tuning in. Another tremendous match, maybe obviously not as dramatic as it was at the French Open, but it's good for him. It's nice for tennis, and it's nice to see a different winner here. Alessandro von Habsburg. That's an interesting name. Alessandro, which sounds like a Latino name, but Habsburg sounds like a European name, like a German name or Dutch name or something of that nature. So maybe I'm pronouncing it wrong. I could be wrong too. Maybe Alessandro. I'm not sure if that's a popular first name. Happy for Yannick. Yep, I am as well. South Tyrol. Interesting. Which I can't picture that. I'm pretty good with my geography. South Tyrol. Oh, I'm excellent normally with my geography, but I don't know where that is. But cool. I don't know if that's a common name. Oh, interesting. So that's right on the border of Austria and Italy. Interesting. So I think you're probably, yeah, Habsburg, right? So that's a German Austrian name, Alessandro. Cool. I always wanted to know. I always figured by his light complexion, I figured he had to be from northern Italy. And a couple of years ago, when I looked it up, sure enough, I think from his hometown, they speak, I think it's almost primarily German and Austrian versus Italian, or maybe it's 50-50. I'm not quite sure of that. But of course, there's in the mountains, in the ski town. And talking about skiing, obviously, when you get a 6'3" guy that can move like he does, and you see how low he gets to the ball, the skiing background certainly helped. So Yana going to the interview. Mary Jo Fernandez. I'm assuming most of you guys probably have this on in the background if you're watching, but maybe not. Forza Yannick, job well done here. On a personal note, some people think I'm not objective in some of my predictions, that I have favorites. Now, I do. Yannick is my favorite player, but when I assess a match and give a prediction who I think is going to win, that doesn't come into it at all. I just assess weather, court conditions, play styles, head to head, and all that jazz before making a decision. So while he is, they're both incredible players and athletes and sportsmen. I'm glad he won from a personal level because I did predict Yannick to win, and I got a lot of grief from selecting Anisimova to beat Iga. But like I said earlier, I can't predict if someone's not going to show up for a match and their nerves are going to completely take over. You just can't predict that until you see someone in the finals of a Grand Slam. Where these two guys, Yannick and Carlos, they did have some nerves in the first set. You could clearly see it, but then they settled in. And I didn't think nerves played a role in this match whatsoever, with the exception of that first set. Skin in me. I'm currently in Italy. I couldn't watch the match. Almost cried when I saw the results. It's got to be a relief if you're an Italian tennis fan to see him break through and after 5 losses to Alcaraz, I can imagine that's probably a nice relief for you to see him win Wimbledon, especially. And Skin and Me, so freaking well deserved. It was. It was. I really thought it might go to a fifth set. Sinner closing out the second set and closing out the fourth set, something he hasn't been able to serve out matches against Alcaraz in a long time, was the difference in this match, right? Some people think that, if you look at the scoreline, you're like, oh, this is relatively a straightforward match for Sinner. Oh, baloney. This match could have turned on just a little bit of a hair. If Sinner doesn't close out that match, close out the second set, he probably loses, or it's going to be really difficult, because I think he had to close out that game at 5-4 in the second. And then again, he had to do it in the fourth set. And he served really well. He was serving fantastic third and fourth set. And that was really the difference in this match, that you take the pressure off. And if you notice at the French Open, when you start missing a lot of first serves, these guys, there's just so much pressure to win those points and win your service games that it's hard to break coming thereafter. So the Sinner serve came alive in the third and fourth set. He was painting lines, being aggressive, getting a few more mistakes, a lot of more service winners. So that was a huge impact on this match. But make no mistake, if he doesn't serve that well at 5-4 in the fourth set and he loses that game, we're probably, instead of talking here, we're probably still watching this match in the fifth set right now. So Carlos fans or anyone else that looks at the scoreline, it's like Sinner really dominated this match. He didn't. No chance. These guys just don't dominate one another. They take advantage of these very rare opportunities, these moments, and either they execute well and they win, or they don't and they lose. I think it's really that straightforward. All right, I've been on here a long time. This is only my second or third live stream ever, so I'm still trying to learn how to do this better. But thanks for tuning in, and have a nice evening to everyone. And we'll see you at the Master 1000 events. I'll probably start doing some more videos and predictions on the Master 1000s, and of course at the US Open later this summer. See you, everybody.